Hello, everyone, and welcome. So today we're back for week 4 of How-to Circus, and I'm your host, Danielle, and today we're going to be making flower sticks. How cool is that? So if you're hanging out with anybody who's a little older, who might have been around in the 80s or 90s, they might also know these as devil sticks. And there's one very small difference between devil sticks and flower sticks. Devil sticks are a straight stick that comes out to a tapered edge here and a tapered edge here. And they're really, really, really hard to use. They're super tricky. Flower sticks, however, have these fun little tassel-y bits on the end. And they take a lot of practice to get the hang of using too. However, the tassels on the end make them float a little more slowly, which makes them a little bit easier to get the hang of when you're just learning as a beginner. All right, so this one's a little bit trickier than the last couple of toys that we've made here too, because today we're gonna need help from a grown-up to use a saw. Now, some of my wood is already pre-cut for me just to make things go a little bit more quickly, but if you don't have a grown-up yet, definitely find one to help you out with these next steps, okay? So, for materials for today, I've already shown you we're going to need a saw. We're also going to need some wood. So this is a piece of wooden doweling. If you have aluminum pipe, or you can also use like a stiff piece of PVC or PEX conduit pipe used for electrical purposes. But you need pretty much a stick. And what a set of flower sticks is you have 3 poles. You have the 2 for the hands, and you have the one that floats back and forth in the middle. So I already have my 2 hand sticks pre-cut. I'm going to need to cut my 3rd stick, which is going to be the flower stick itself. Once we get our sticks cut, we'll need sandpaper to sand the edges of them because they can get a little bit splintery. And then we're also going to need some tape. Now, these types of tape that I have make things really nice and grippy, so it makes it a little bit easier when you're a beginner learning how to use a flower stick. So this one is the type of tape, it's silicone tape that's usually used for plumbing repairs. I also have this stuff though. And this is used for tennis rackets, usually to get that nice cushy grip on the side. So this is going to be on my hand sticks, and this is going to be on the flower stick in the middle. But some other things you could use would be the inner tubes of old bike tires. You could also use hockey tape to give you a little bit of extra grip. Let's see, what else could you use? You could use things like duct tape, or you could even use things like fabric and a little bit of glue. So use your creativity. See what you have lying around the house, because some of these things can be substituted with materials you have lying around at home too. All right, once we get our sticks made, then we need to create the tassels for them. So here I have some EVA foam. It's the flexible craft foam that you usually get at craft stores, dollar store, and it's fun for making lots of things. That's what I'm going to use to make the little tassels on the end of my devil sticks, or my flower sticks, because we're making tassels on them. But these ones here are made with felt on the end of them. And they also have a little bit of fabric covering the center here. So this is a little different construction than the one that we're going to be making today. The ones we're going to be making today are going to be a little bit easier. These ones have some sewing in them, and there's nice cushy stuff on the end. So if you happen to get a little bop when you're practicing, they don't hurt as much. Ours aren't going to be as fancy as these, but they're going to work just as well. All right. So, hi, Isaac. I see you saying hi. Hello. All right. So to get started, now, like most things, I've already kind of pre-cut a few notches in this. So it's going to take me a lot less time to saw this piece than it would normally take you to saw your wood at home. Just to let you know, if it seems like it's a lot harder than what I'm making it out to look like, I kind of cheated a little bit and helped a little bit before we started filming tonight. Now, one big thing is make sure you have help with this, okay? You don't want to cut any fingers, and sometimes it's a good idea to wear things like protective gloves while you're cutting this as well. I've had lots of help pre-cutting mine. So I'm going to get a nice firm stance, but if you have a vise, it would be great to hold this in some sort of a grip. And I'm going to do a couple little strokes upwards just to get it going in there. before I gently start sawing down my piece. And the trick with sawing is you want to be super, super, super gentle while you're doing this. There we go. All right. So now there's a little bit of rough stuff around the edge there. I don't know if you can see it because it's a little bit bright in here. But right there, I don't want to get any splinters on my fingers. So I'm going to use my sandpaper and sand the tip where I sawed it off there. There we go. This takes a little bit of time. And if you have fresh sandpaper, it goes a lot faster too. I'm using some really old stuff here, so it might take a little while. All right, so now I've got one longer stick for the flower stick and two shorter sticks for my hand stick. If you're wondering about how long to make these, I do have a measuring tape here. I just measured mine off of my first set, but for the flower stick part, we're looking at about 27 inches. Hi, Amy. I see you there too. Hello. It's so great of you to join us. So we're looking at 27 inches for the flower stick, and we're looking at about 18 inches roughly for each of the hand sticks. But you want to find a length that works well for you. I like to be able to twirl mine above and below my arm. So as long as it's not so long that it hits me in the armpit when I put it there, I think that's a great length. All right, so now for the fun part. Now we get to start decorating. And if you followed along with our hula hoop tutorial, then you'll have a bit of experience with how to tape things. It takes a lot of patience. So we're going to take our time and we're going to do this nice and slowly. I'm going to put on some music while we get this going. The music that we're playing today is a Parav Stellar Mega Mix. So if you're looking for that, I just found it on YouTube here. All right. So first, we have our tennis racket grip. And it comes in these really long strips like this. And there's a nice little sticky bit on one of the ends. So I'm looking for that sticky bit first. There it is. I'm going to peel the end off of that. And that's what I'm going to start with on the bottom of my first hand stick. And I'm going to pull the tape around real nice and tight, trying to overlap each layer as I go to get nice and tight and even in there. If you did the hula hoops with us there the week before last, then you'll know how hard taping is, but you'll also find how much easier it is to tape a straight stick than it is to tape a curved stick. I'm very particular about my tape. I like it to be nice and even. So I'm taking my time here to make sure that it lines up very nicely. I don't know if you can see how I'm trying to get each groove symmetrical in there. That's what's taking so long on my end. So I'm going to keep twirling around and around and around. And keep on going. All right, we're halfway there on the first stick. This is going to take a little bit of time, but with lots of patience, we'll get there. All right, keep on going. And if you find that you get any little rumples or rolls, just pull your tape back and try and line it up again. Now, if my tape doesn't go all the way down, that's all right. I want to make this a little bit, there we go, a little bit different because I actually want the end to be the bouncy side where the flower stick will go. That'll give it a little bit more spring. So what I'm going to do is my tape doesn't completely cover my handle. I'm going to start with my hockey tape, and I'm just going to finish that off with hockey tape the rest of the way down. There we go. So I'm starting the hockey tape. I'm going to go one loop around just to make sure that's nice and secure. There we go. And now I'm going to roll it all the way down to the rest of the tip. And this will help and make it nice and extra grippy for your hands. If you're wondering why we're using the hockey tape at all to cover up the wood, it's because when you're practicing, your hands are going to get sweaty. And so this will help stop the sticks from flying out of your hands while you practice. And I'm going to take my tape and come right over that little nub there. There we go. So I'm going to come right over that little nub, and then I'm going to fold my tape over, nice and flat. Don't know if you can see how nice and flat that is there. And then we're going to put another piece of tape around just to hold that there. There we go. All right, so that's the first stick done. All right, now we have one more hand stick to make. So back to our grippy tape. This part isn't even supposed to be the grippy tape, and it just won't let go of me. All right, there we go. That's better. And we unravel it all the way to the end. And we're going to start with the sticky side again. All right, so sticky side down, and I've already sanded down my hand sticks when I pre-cut my wood. But just in case that point was lost, you definitely want to make sure that all of the tips of your wood are sanded down. So that way you get a nice smooth edge, because on one side you do have the edge sticking out. All right, so we're going to twirl this side up again. All right. One cool thing about making flower sticks is there's so many different materials you can use to try and make them. I'm really curious to see what you're coming up with at home too. If you're following along and you're making your very own set of flower sticks at home, I'd love for you to share some photos or videos with me after this tutorial's over, and then I could see what you've been up to as well, because it's always fun to see how creative other people can get with their ideas. All right, keep on wrapping. Keep it real nice and tight all the way up. There we go. All right. We're almost to the end of the grippy tape now, so we're getting ready to finish that off with the hockey tape again. Awesome. There we go. So remember, one loop around to make sure that it holds. And then we're going to loop it around the rest of the way. Oh, I didn't do that loop tight enough. See how that's coming off? Let's try that one more time. Just like anything, if it doesn't work the first time, just try it again. And the more times you try it, the more practice you'll have, and eventually you'll get the hang of it. There we go. That's much better. Now we roll it. All right. There we go. All the way around to the tip again. And we're going to cut it off. We're going to fold it over. And we're going to put one more little loop of tape around. All right. Now, I want to try these out already, so let's see how they work. All right. You're going to try them with the bouncy end to the front? Oh, yeah. I think those work pretty good. Awesome. All right. Let's move on to the flower stick now. So for this part, I'm going to use this silicone tape, and this is going to help keep it really bouncy, but it's also going to make it a little stickier, so that's going to grip to my sticks a little better while I'm trying to learn. This tape's a little trickier to work with, though, so if you're using the same tape I'm using, have lots of patience, and if it doesn't turn out perfect, that's all right. All right. Got quite the mess over here now. Okay. Now this tape has some plastic on the back of it, so I'm going to cut a strip first before I start wrapping it around. And it only sticks to itself. It's not going to stick to the wood, so I'm going to use a little bit of hockey tape to help hold it too. All right. One thing that I've learned from working with this kind of tape is it does make it a little less tricky to work with if you leave some of the plastic on until you're up to that part. So you'll see what I mean as we start to go. So I'm going to tape the hockey tape end on first, and then I'm going to do one loop with the silicone tape to make it stick to itself, nice and sticky, and I'm pulling the silicone tape as I go too. So that way it helps to preserve my tape, and that also helps it to stick to itself. So I'm going to pull this down, and I'm going to pull this. See how stretchy that is? See how stretchy it is? I'm going to stretch it while I roll it, just like this. And again, I'm going to try and be really careful to make sure that I cover up at least a little bit of that first layer of tape. See how there's ridges showing up there? So that's what you want to look for, to make sure that your tape is covering the layer under it. If you're using something like fabric, if your fabric is dipped in glue to help it to stick, you'll be able to see the ridge of the fabric as well. But I'm not sure what other materials you might be working with, so you might have to be a little bit experimental in making sure that you get this layered just so. And if you find that your hands are getting crampy from taping so much, you notice I keep changing my grip. You don't always have to hold it in the same position if you feel like you're getting a bit tired of doing that. Because this is a lot of repetitive motion, of rolling the stick around in the tape. Well, we're almost halfway there. Let's keep going. There we go. Way up. And up we go again. And see how I keep peeling this tape off, but not too much, just enough. I might have to get a second piece of tape. That's all right. So with my pile. All right. Almost there. Now I'm coming up to the end of this piece of tape, so I'm going to cut another strip, but I'm not going to cut this next one nearly as long. And where I have a bit of silicone tape there already to grip onto, I don't need to use a bit of hockey tape to hold this one now. Let's try another strip here. So I'm going to pull this really tight and push it over top, right there. There we go. I got a little bit of a ridge there. Let me see if I can try and smooth that out a bit. All right, that's much better. Now, one of the things you want to be kind of mindful of when you're making flower sticks is you want these to be nice and evenly weighted. So you do want to try and use the same amount of material on one side as you do the other. That's one of the reasons why it's such a good idea to try and evenly space your silicone tape all the way up. All right, so I'm coming up to the other end here now. And because this is the stuff that is self-adhesive, I'm just going to pull it really tight around itself and then snip off that extra tail because I don't want any added weight on this side. All right, so one way that you can check and see how balanced your tape job is you can use one finger and try and hold near the middle of your stick. So mine's a little heavier on this side. That's not the end of the world. Let's try again. There we go. Yeah, so it's a little bit heavier on this side. So when I'm using my materials to make my flowers, I'm going to try and put a little extra tape on this side and a little less tape on this side. So this part, I find this part to be the fun part now. So I'm going to start off by cutting about a half a sheet. I'd say this is what, like 4 or 6 inches or so of material. That's about how much I'm going to start with, and then I'll trim down my flowers as I'm going if I need to. Don't worry if your cuts aren't perfect on this part. This is going to be decorative, and these flowers are going to be moving a lot while you practice with your new flower sticks, right? You can't really tell how even these flowers are, can you? Especially when it's moving. So don't stress out too much about that. Just try and make sure that you use a balanced amount of materials on each side. All right, so when I roll this up, just like this, it makes a nice cylinder. And then that cylinder is going to go over here, okay? Before we add the cylinder on, we're going to cut our tassels though. So I've got my material rolled up. I can squish about where it is in the middle. That seems good to me. So I'm only going to cut my tassels halfway down. So what I mean is, if I was going to fold this in half, one more time, I'm only going to cut this far. And I'm going to cut each flower about an inch. Just like this, see? So my tassels are only going to take up about a half of my foam. All right, so I'm going to do some snips. We want to add more snips for a bit more motion after we can. But for now, just going to add a nice fringe. I find the thicker the strips you cut, the less movement you get if you're using a harder material like foam. If you're using a softer material like felt or leather, then the thicker tassels will give you a bit more resistance. But if you're using a thick material like this, then the thinner the tassel, the less resistance they'll have. All right, I'm going to see how this looks now and make some adjustments as we go. So I'm going to try and roll this up pretty tight just to get an idea of how big this flower is going to be. There. Now that seems like a pretty big flower, doesn't it? I'm going to cut a little bit off the bottom, and I'm going to trim these to make them a little bit narrower too. All right. And if you're wondering how long of a piece you need, I'd say this is probably about 18 inches or so. Let me just double check with my measuring tape. Oh, wow. That was a great guess. That was exactly 18 inches. All right, I'm going to cut a little bit off the bottom, maybe about 1.5 inches or so, just to trim off some extra. There we go. And now I'm going to cut some of my tassels in half. It's always better to cut them a bit too thick at the beginning because it's much harder to make them thinner than it is to make them thinner. Because all I'm doing now is I'm going through and I'm cutting each one of those ones that I first cut in two. So cutting right down the center of each one to make them nice and thin. There we go. Oh, that's nice and fringy. That'll be so much fun. All right. So to attach my flower to my stick, I'm going to get a little bit of hockey tape. And I'm going to cut off a strip that's about the same distance from the bottom to where the cut of the tassel is. So if you can see that, I'm only cutting it about that far. And I'm going to use this tape to tape my foam to my stick. So I'm lining it up so that the part where I cut meets the end, right? See that? That's where the cut is, and it meets just right on the end of my stick. So around my tape goes to hold it nice and tight. And then I'm going to pull my flower as tight as I can. And if you are using foam like I am, if it stretches a little bit, that's okay. That just means that you're going to get a real nice tight seal. All right, now we're going to wrap real tight all the way around. All righty, there we go. So now that I've come to the edge, I'm going to hold it real tight, and I'm going to grab some hockey tape, and I am going to start going around that in hockey tape. Just like this. Now, if you want, you can just go around the top part. I like to go around the top and around the bottom because I find that it makes it extra secure like this. So I'm going to do one more around the bottom. There we go. And I'm just going to go back and forth around the top and then around the bottom to try and seal that ridge in there. Oh, my tape's getting a bit twisty. That's okay. If your tape starts getting twisty, you can either snip it off and keep going or twist that right in there and add it to your ridge. One thing that's going to make these a little bit easier is if you do have a bit of a ridge there where your flower attaches onto your stick, then your hand sticks will have a really nice spot to grip onto. So then you can kind of balance it right in there like that, right? So that's our first flower stick. All right, now we're going to do the other side. Again, if you find you still don't have enough movement in here, you want them to be even more tasseling, just cut them down a bit more narrow, or the more you use them, the more wear and tear they'll get. So eventually they will start to soften up. So if that's any motivation to get out there and practice some more, once we finish this half, then we'll get into the second part of this tutorial where I teach you how to get started using these flower sticks. So stay with me. We're going to do the other half of our flower, and then we'll get into the extra fun part of how to use them. So I'm cutting my foam in half again because I want to keep the same weight on both sides. And I remember cutting about 1 inch off, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that over here. If you want to be really particular and make sure they're perfectly balanced, you can measure each time you cut to make sure that you're doing the same on each side. But for now, I'm just going to use my eyes and estimate. And I don't know why, I do find it easier for me to do the bigger cuts first, even if I am going to cut them in half again after. So bear with me, we're going to cut these fringes twice. All right, now we're going to cut the fringe one more time. There we go. Put this here just so it's not in my way as much. There we go. Almost there. All right, there we go. So now we're going to use the hockey tape and cut off a little strip of hockey tape, attach it to the edge of our foam, and then we're going to attach that to the end of our stick. There we go. Now, if your hockey tape's a little bit longer, don't worry about that because remember, we're going to be covering all that up with hockey tape again anyway. So we twist, holding it really nice and tightly. Keep holding very tight and twist, and twist, and twist, all the way to the end. And now we're going to start taping that again. So on this one, I went up pretty close to where my fringe is cut. I'm going to do the same on this side. There we go. go. And go up to cover the gap. And then down to get the ridge. Up again. There we go. And one more round. Awesome. All right, so now let's check and see if this baby's balanced again. Let's see. Doesn't seem to want to balance very well in the center. That side's still a little heavy, right? Although it's not too far off balance. There we go. Maybe it was just me that needed to readjust and recalibrate. So now that I know where my balance point is, I'm also going to put just a little bit of hockey tape there so I can see it. If you want to use a contrasting piece of tape to make this really obvious, you can. But this will serve as a nice little guide for the next part of this tutorial. There we go. So now I know where my balance point is. It's right there. Awesome. Let me get this mess cleaned up, and then we'll get started with how to use our flower sticks. All right, so the hardest part about learning how to use flower sticks is, I'm going to turn off that music so you can focus. All right, so the hardest part about learning how to use flower sticks is getting the timing and the rhythm consistent. Because what the flower sticks do is they go back and forth and back and forth and bouncy, bouncy, back and forth. And when you're using your hand sticks, you're trying to catch the stick in time with that rhythm. And that can be really, really tricky. All right, so I'm going to move a few more things out of my space here. And I'm actually going to use this table to show you, because when I start learning how to use flower sticks, I started down low on the ground, right? Got to start at the bottom before you work your way up. And one thing that I found really helpful was using the ground to let my flower sticks fall back and forth, because it gave me a little extra help while I got my rhythm and my timing and my coordination a little bit more refined. So we're going to go back and forth, just like this. And you're going to notice the reason why that middle point is so important is when I'm going back and forth on my flower stick, I'm going to move my table back so you can see a little bit better. There we go. When we go back and forth on the flower stick, I'm holding about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up the stick. And that's where I want to catch it with my hand sticks when I bounce back and forth. Okay? When you can get a consistent rhythm going back and forth like this, eventually you can lift it up. Ooh, this is a really bouncy flower stick. This turned out great. And it takes a lot of practice and consistency before you can keep the flower sticks going in the air, and it takes even more before you can stop them without dropping something on the ground. So, just like any juggling or any object manipulation that you learn, you're going to have to get used to picking things up from the ground so many times because they're going to fall. And that's okay though, because that's all part of the process when you're learning how to practice. So let's try it again. We'll go back and forth. Kind of reminds me of almost like a tick-tock motion too. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. So if you can get this to go consistent and tick-tock like a clock, then you'll know that your rhythm is good to begin lifting it. And up you go. Now, some other cool things you can do with your flower sticks are you can do rolls. So you can do rolls down, rolls up. You can balance your flower stick like you saw me doing earlier, like this. You can twirl your flower stick like a baton. Or you can work really hard and learn lots and lots and lots of hard tricks. In all honesty, I haven't practiced my flower sticks as much as I've practiced many of my other circus props. So I'm still learning to keep mine going back and forth on a TikTok like that. But if you check out YouTube, I bet you there are lots of tutorials that you can find that can show you some intermediate or advanced tricks. And if you get really stuck, let me know, and I might be able to help connect you with someone who can teach you some more intermediate or advanced moves too. But for now, practice getting that TikTok motion back and forth, and let me know how you're doing. Are you doing better with your flower sticks than I'm doing with mine? I'd love to hear that. Let me know. Either send me a message, show me in the comments, or upload a video of you using your very own flower sticks that you've made from this tutorial too. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week for week 5. And in week 5, we're going to do an extra tricky trick. So I look forward to seeing you all again for us to learn how to do roll-up bolas together. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.